Okay, I've got Dean Forbes with me here, somebody I've known for a very long time, who's had an experience as an international player, as a football manager, and as a player in the non-league circuit. Okay, so Dean, can you tell us about your path in football and actually in your life?
So I grew up obviously playing a lot of football. In our area, a lot of boys similar backgrounds to us played a lot of football. So did schoolboy at Crystal Palace for a while. Had a lot of other clubs kind of after leaving school. 1 or 2 year contracts here and there. Palace, Northampton, spent a bit of time in Northampton. Before going into the non-league scene, played for Gravesend and Northfleet, Tooting and Mitcham, probably most of my time in non-league at Bromley as well. And really, since it was clear I wasn't going to be a professional, focused a lot more on trying to forge a career for myself. So a lot of work in IT and technology companies and software. That's what I still do now.
Okay, so I mean, as a manager, what did you implement as a manager that your previous managers didn't? And obviously, some of the things, what did you take as well?
I think in my life, I've always tried to steal things from other people, like people that are good or clearly at the top of their game. And I got a lot of friends like you who play football, so I got to see what good managers do. So when I became a manager, the most important thing to me was like having a total infrastructure around the football club, from good coaches to decent physios, to good equipment, good training facilities. Try and just put an infrastructure around the football inside, so by the time you've got players, the only thing they need to do and the only thing they need to worry about is going out and training or going out and playing. And I think that was, that made quite a difference.
Okay, which country did you play for?
Guyana.
And what was their footballing culture? So I mean, over here, I'll say our English culture is pretty much our English one is, I would say, more about passion and pride and the tackle. And what would you say your country?
Guyana's a Caribbean country, so if you never knew it was a Caribbean country and you watch them play football, you could tell because it's quite relaxed.
Yeah.
They enjoy the game. Like the focus for them is the game of football.
Okay.
And they're very relaxed about that, and they think if they play well, they'll win a game. So in that environment, it was less about blood and thunder. It was much more about this is a game we like to play, so let's just go and play.
Okay. How important is decision making in football?
I think it's important, and I think people underestimate the intelligence of footballers to make decisions like in a split second or a couple of seconds, or to assess like a whole, where that player is, where and how they've received the ball, what the score in the game is at that moment. All of those things that come into a football player's head in that 1 second to make that decision. So it is quite important, but I don't know. People talk about it a lot. I don't think it's that important. I think there's other things that are more important than that decision making.
So you say it's quite important, not that much, but it's quite. How much would you say in all your years in football would you say a coach or a manager would put into maybe doing exercises that involve decision making? So training methods where when you're in a situation, maybe telling you what your options are, and giving you the freedom to choose those options.
In my personal experience, I didn't spend much time with coaches who worked on those kind of things at all.
Okay. Why do you think England aren't successful?
It's a 66 million person debate, and I don't know. I think when you talk about culture, I think that's quite an important aspect. Like if you look at successful football teams and the way they play and related to the culture of that nation, I think you can see a correlation. Like the Latin teams, expressive, relaxed, quite passionate. You see that in their football. If you think about the English culture, it's quite reserved, it's quite pessimistic, it's quite risk averse. So you see that in our football as well. And I think having been coached and played football in England and know people who play football in England to a decent level, it's hard to find examples of where English players are coached to be totally free and totally expressive. And you see it. I mean, you see it so much. You see players who have been had a really high impact and been really expressive in other leagues come here and just be stifled. Like Ryan Babel. I was so excited about him coming to England. If you think about when he was playing in Holland, he did one thing and one thing only, which was to go forward and attack, and those are his strengths. You see him in England in his own third, like, as much as he's in the opposing third.
Yeah.
So how can that even be? I don't even know how that can be right. Like, how do you bring a player like that into your team and ask him to do that on a continual basis?
That's good
so
example.
I think that's why England aren't successful. If you look at the culture, I don't know how you can win a sport or a competitive situation where you're always pessimistic, always risk averse, and always having to do as much where you use your weaknesses as where you use your strengths. It's impossible.
Yeah, true. So, how would you rate, your football education?
I didn't. In all the time I've been in football and spent a lot of time with coaches, I learned very little. I learned very little from coaches. If I learned anything playing football, I learned it really either from myself or watching players who I admired and trying to do the things that they did. But other than a really short period in my life, I don't think I learned much from coaches.
And would you say that happens a lot in this country, where many players actually have to learn for themselves and not actually taught?
Since I've been involved in management and been interested in management, I watch managers and coaches and I watch how they communicate with their teams or they communicate during training. And I genuinely think like 90% of the things that come out of their mouth, it's hard for a player to take those words and learn from them. You know, people say like, oh, we've got to try hard and you've got to be in their faces and we've got to give 100%. Like, those aren't instructions, those are words. So how do you improve? If that's like what you're hearing, how do you improve because of that? I don't see many coaches, I've been fortunate to work with a couple, but I don't see many coaches who say, in that situation, here is what I want you to do, and here's why you should do it, and here's kind of how you can do it, right, and work through that kind of process with you. If you say to somebody, you know, we've got to close down or we've got to work hard, nobody's going to, how do you improve? How do you improve it?
That is true, that's true. So, how would you guide a 14-year-old you in football?
Yeah, like I said to you before, like if I talk to myself at 14, I'd say, just quit.
Just quit. Okay.
But I think that's important because you see a lot of players who get gassed up by managers or gassed up by their friends about how good they are and pursue football for a long time and ultimately never make it, right? And you come out of trying to be a footballer at 25, it's going to be hard for you to make a decent, honest living at that point. So I think.
But knowing what you know now, because you can guide yourself into because you know more about the game, maybe you could guide yourself into a career.
In football, I think the truth of the matter is that I don't think I was ever good enough. Like, I had a lot of flirtations with being a professional footballer for a long period of time. I don't think I was ever like good enough to have been a professional footballer. I was fortunate enough to make a good living playing non-league football for a long time. If I knew at 14 what I know now, I probably could have made even more money.
Do you know what I find interesting? Because you said you wasn't good enough. So this is what I'm going to ask you then. How many players do you see playing professionally and actually earning a very good living who you don't think are good enough? Do you know? I mean, what class is being good enough? Because football's all about opinions.
Yeah.
So really and truly, you know,
you can't blame the players in those situations.
No. I'm just saying it's about opinion. So you know, you might think, you know what, there are players that maybe you don't feel are good enough. So really and truly, you might have been doubting yourself. You could be doubting yourself, but a manager could rate you highly and think, you know what, I think you can do a job for me. I've come across players like that, but they don't think they're all that. But you know, managers rate them very highly.
No, I think I'm brilliant at football. Don't get me don't get me wrong. But brilliant enough to play like at the highest level or decent level, probably not. But there's a lot of terrible players in English professional football. There's a lot of brilliant ones as well at lower levels. Like, it's puzzling to me as someone like Jody Morris didn't have a career at a higher level.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I look at someone like Fabregas and I don't think Jody was that good, but he could handle the ball in any situation, could pick any pass on the pitch. You know, Jeremy Redknapp is another one who is quite injury plagued, but brilliant technically. So there's a lot of good players that don't make it as well.
No, that's true.
Really know.
No, that is true. I mean, how would you score? I was going to say, how would you? Do you think football's helped you in your working life in any way?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. And a lot of people that I've worked with over the years say that, like, if I've been good or successful at something, a lot of them have traced it back to my time in sport or interest in sport. Because the interesting thing I learned about sport when I was in business is that sports people have a mentality of every time to do it better.
Yeah.
You think about football, every season you go back,
Yeah.
you go back into pre-season to be a bit fitter, you go back into that season with that team to do better than you did last year.
Yeah.
You go into every game like wanting to perform at a higher level than you did last year, and that's how sports people measure themselves. They don't measure themselves by being consistently good, they measure themselves by consistently and relentlessly improving, and that is something that is pretty unique to sports people. In business, you get different situations, so a successful year one year might be losing a certain amount of money. You might say, look, that's a defeat that I'm willing to accept this year and call it successful. You know, in business you might accept being acquired by someone else instead of just going on and being brilliant yourself. In football you never really make those trade-offs. In football and sport, every year it's about, I'm going to do much better than I did last year, and that's been my attitude to my professional career, my business career.
Okay. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say a few countries, and what I want you to do is when I say the countries, I want you to say a word that sums up their style of play. So for example, if I say Ireland, I want you to then tell me the first word that comes into your head that describes their kind of football, how the players that play for Ireland. Yeah?
Don't say Ireland.
Okay. Okay, so we say Italy.
Defensive.
Spain.
Expressive.
Brazilian.
Skillful.
England.
Negative.
Holland.
Technical.
Russia. That's a hard one. I thought I'd throw that in at the last one, to be honest.
To be fair, I don't even know. I can't remember the last time I watched them. It's not a country that plays football that interests me, so I couldn't even say.
Okay, is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about, you know, football that you think we have not covered? That's quite important.
No.
Okay. Alright then, thank you very much. That's it. And then what I do is I just cut this all bit out so you can dance and be crippled.